Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson-Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this Tuesday, April 21st. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Time T-minus 59 minutes, 3 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of SpaceX's next Falcon 9 rocket. An important payload on board for the United States Space Force. This a GPS-3 satellite, the 10th and final of its generation before the Space Force switches to launching the next generation version of these satellites called GPS-3F. We'll talk more about that as we cruise on through the count, get a little bit closer to liftoff, of course, and we'll talk about the Falcon 9 rocket and where this mission falls within the greater context of commercial spaceflight these days. As we're getting rolling, though, I want to thank the more than 380 of you who are watching along with us live today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Time of liftoff this morning is 2:53 a.m. Eastern, 6:53 UTC. This is the opening of a 15-minute long window, so not a lot of time to play with if SpaceX needs a little bit more latitude before it starts taking the Falcon 9 rocket, but from a weather perspective, things are progressing nicely. A 90% chance for favorable conditions tonight. And we are expecting the Falcon 9 to start fueling here in just about 20 minutes' time. Taking a look at the satellite view of the Florida Peninsula, you're seeing this courtesy of the GOES East satellite from NOAA, this weather loop here. See some clouds that are streaming across, moving to the southeast over Florida. Starting to thin out, though, as the end of the loop draws near, so pretty good conditions tonight for a launch for this mission that's heading out on a northeasterly trajectory. So for those of you who are watching along the east coast of the United States, if you are able to capture a glimpse of the Falcon 9 as it takes flight, be sure to tag us on X. You can find us there or on Blue Sky Threads and Facebook by simply searching for Spaceflight Now. As we're getting going here, our editor here at Spaceflight Now, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our photographers are strewn about both the press site as well as over on the Cape Canaveral side to be able to capture multiple views of this Falcon 9 once it does take off from Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. If you're not following the fellas on X, you can find them at their handles here. John is at John Pisani Photo. Adam is at A Byrne NYC. Michael at MD Kane Jr. And again, you can find us at Spaceflight Now by simply searching for Spaceflight Now. We are also joined at this point in the morning by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions will be joining us in a little bit. We're also joined in the live chat this morning by our moderators, M. Teresa and Jeff Hansen. Good morning to you both. We ask that you please adhere to our live chat rules throughout the course of the coverage. If you would be so kind as to post your message in English so that the moderators can respond as appropriate. We also ask that you don't delve into topics of overt politics or religion, and please don't use all caps. Emojis are perfectly fine. We would just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large chunk of the live chat space. And last but certainly not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. We'll all get along swimmingly. We're also joined this morning by one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, who's able to help answer folks' questions in the live chat space. Speaking of our channel members, they help power our continuous broadcasts and bring you the live coverage that you're all enjoying. So big thanks to folks like Marco Gennari. Let's see, we've got this morning Ken Urbanek, Willow Zemum. Still a little bit early, so folks are finding their way in here this morning. Kind of an odd hour for those of us on the East Coast. So let's see, U.S. Army wife by the look of it, and Mark P. Good morning to you all. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Want to welcome in new channel members. Our new channel member, Willie's For Real. Good handle. Joining us, channel membership at the Pad Leader level, and Master Dad Bane, marking 9 months with us as a channel member at the Pad Leader level, who says, woohoo, 9 months. Thanks, mods, and others who help run the channel. Thank you, Dad Bane. Appreciate you sticking with us. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or just want to offer a little bit of support this morning, you can follow the lead of channel member Michael McRory and use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now. And that, my friends, is always very much appreciated. To that end, I want to thank Michael for both the $2 Super Chat early in the broadcast, saying very short launch window tonight, huh? And yes, for those who missed that remark of mine earlier, this is just a 15-minute long window, so not the 4-hour long windows that we see with the Starlink mission. Thankfully for all of us here tonight, this morning, however you want to think about it. Oh, I see I missed a new channel member. Welcome to XA Driver, joining us with membership at the Pad Leader level. And Michael also had another super chat, $5 super chat, saying Stephen Young did an awesome job switching camera views, putting up graphics during the Blue Origin launch. Yes, there were some technical challenges during the Blue Origin launch that the team definitely powered through. So it was a yeoman's work from a technical front. Certainly appreciate Stephen for that, as well as all the fellas, John and Adam, who are out in the field up against it. Also, if you're watching this broadcast not live but on a replay, or if you just want to support in another form or fashion, you can head on over to our website, spaceflightnow.com/donate, or scan the QR code that you can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. There you can learn more about how we use the donations, through the super chats, as well as directly to the donate button, to support our on-the-ground journalism here at Spaceflight Now, both here in Florida and beyond. Speaking of beyond, one of the items that we talk about in the donate page is, again, those out-of-Florida work trips where we go to where the news happens to bring you the best possible coverage of current and upcoming missions. To that end, actually, I will be hopping on a flight here in the latter part of the morning and heading up north to learn all about the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, the next big flagship space telescope that NASA is set to launch later this year. So looking forward to hearing from the experts on that up at the Goddard Spaceflight Center, just to the north of the heart of Washington, D.C. Actually be my first time heading up to Goddard, so quite excited for the opportunity to hear from the folks that have been working on Roman, as well as to hear from NASA leadership, including the administrator, Jared Isaacman, and there may be a little bit more coming from some other missions that Goddard has their hands in. So you'll want to be sure to follow along for that. We have many more good stories coming from this trip, hopefully later today and certainly into the not-too-distant future. So again, we thank you for your support, either through the super chats, through channel membership, or the donate page that help make what is, we think, a worthy endeavor to go to where the story is happening and limit the amount of time that we are covering things remotely. But of course, this is unfortunately not a cheap endeavor, and we certainly appreciate all of you who are able to support us in that journalistic endeavor. So thank you. With all that out of the way, we're T-minus 47 minutes, 22 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket today. We've shown you a number of our camera views of the Falcon 9 rocket. Let's go ahead and bring it a little closer to home. This photo captured by SpaceX. You can see the crescent moon there on the bottom right, and a close-up view of both the Falcon 9 payload fairings, the upper stage. Want to note a couple of things in this photo. First, you can see the gray band that is just above the inner stage. That's not always present on a Falcon 9 rocket, but this extra bit of thermal protection is added to upper stages when there's a longer than typical coast phase where either the upper stage is in excessive exposure to the sun. They otherwise want to make sure that the propellant stays at the correct temperature. This mission does have a decently long coast phase after SECO 1 or second stage engine cutoff. That happens on this mission actually before the booster lands on the drone ship. SECO 1 is expected at just about 8 minutes post liftoff, a little bit after that. And the upper stage will be in coast until about 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 31 seconds. There will be a burn to put it on the correct trajectory for the deployment of the GPS satellite, which will last a little bit less than a minute's time. And then the GPS space vehicle number 10 will deploy about an hour and a half post liftoff. Given that this is not the same type of classified payload that is often launched as part of the National Security Space Launch, or NSSL program, we are expecting to see the deployment of the GPS satellites, so we hope you are able to stick around with us through that point of deployment. A couple other things to note while we're sitting on this picture here, just under 45 minutes before planned liftoff. There's usually not iconography on the Falcon 9 upper stage, except in special circumstances, like with the NASA mission. We'll sometimes see the meatball logo there on the Falcon 9 upper stage. This time it's emblazoned with the altered United States flag with the 250 logo in the middle and then Freedom 250 beneath that. Of course, this year is the 250th anniversary of the United States. And so, like with the solid rocket boosters on the Space Launch System rocket for the Artemis 2 mission, there are a number of nods to this anniversary of the United States, this being one of them, an important GPS mission, getting that additional paint job. Also with the payload fairings that are flying today, one of them is new, one of them is flight proven. The one that has flown before supported the launch of the GPS 3-9 mission that launched back in January of this year. SpaceX's Ann Mason noted that having the flight heritage and the proven reliability and the knowledge of how it was flown and recovered from the U.S. Space Force's perspective helped give them confidence in using that particular fairing half in support of this critical payload heading up into medium Earth orbit today. Last thing I'll point out in this picture, which is not exactly germane to this mission, but you can see the crew access arm that is in the stowed configuration there on the left-hand side of this picture. This now currently the only SpaceX crew access arm that is out here at between their two launch complexes. This past week, SpaceX brought the crew access arm that was used to support flights over at Launch Complex 39A. That was taken away from that site and believed to be brought over to the Hangar X facilities near the Kennedy Space Center. Reason being is SpaceX is preparing for an upcoming Falcon Heavy launch that's set to fly now less than a week from now on Monday the 27th. That will launch the Viasat-3 payload on behalf of Viasat. Of course, we'll have full coverage of that mission, the first time Falcon Heavy's launched in quite some time, so you'll want to be sure to be subscribed to the Spaceflight Now YouTube channel so you don't miss that coverage. It's a start of a run of big rocket launches in the span of about 24-ish hours. After the Falcon Heavy launches in the morning, if all goes well, there is a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket that's set to take off from Space Launch Complex 41, delivering a batch of Amazon LEO satellites into low Earth orbit. And then more Amazon LEO satellites are set to fly from French Guiana, coming up the following morning on an Ariane 6-4 rocket out of French Guiana. So lots coming up on the launch front. There's also a Rocket Lab Electron launch scheduled for about 2 days from now, if all continues to go well. They have good weather down in New Zealand. Lots to cover, lots to keep tabs on. You can always head over to our launch schedule over at our website, spaceflightnow.com. Check to see what's going on with what's going up. Time now, T-minus 39 minutes, 36 seconds in counting. As we're coming up to the point at which the SpaceX launch director is set to make the start, or the call on the start of propellant load. Go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline, but briefly want to hit on a super chat here from channel member and moderator Jeff Hansen, who says, "Go space, go Cape, go SpaceX, go Falcon 9, go GPS 3, Space Vehicle 10, Godspeed 1095." 1095 is the tail number for the Falcon 9 first stage booster that is supporting today's mission. It's launching for the 7th time after flying 6 batches of Starlink satellites up into low Earth orbit. As part of a pre-launch media briefing to discuss this mission, representatives from the U.S. Space Force noted that currently for national security space launch missions, they have certified their use of a Falcon 9 rocket that has flown up to 10 times. So that's why you see some of the comparatively younger boosters supporting these critical national security related payloads, like the GPS constellation satellites. However, they are working towards expanding that threshold to allow for boosters that have flown more than 10 missions to support these NSSL satellites. That bit of news was from Colonel Ryan Hisort, or Hisort, excuse me, Colonel Ryan Hisort. Colonel Hisort wears a few different hats for the U.S. Space Force. He is the commander of System Delta 80, the acting deputy portfolio acquisition executive for Space Access, as well as being the program manager for the National Security Space Launch within Space Systems Command. That NSSL program is about a $13.5 billion program that manages acquisition of launch capabilities for these national security payloads. Currently T-minus 36 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. I mentioned we would talk about the fueling timeline, so let's go ahead and step 2. Assuming that the SpaceX launch director did in fact give the go-ahead for today's mission, fueling is set to begin now in just a little bit more than a minute's time. At the T-minus 35 minute mark, SpaceX will start to load propellant onto the Falcon 9 rocket, RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene, as well as liquid oxygen. Pause here for a moment. SpaceX actually did post their social media about 2 minutes ago saying that a propellant load is about to begin, so the go-ahead was given. Weather remaining 90% favorable for today's mission. So things well on their way for a good launch of the Falcon 9 rocket coming up here again at 2:53 p.m. or excuse me, 2:53 a.m. Eastern, 06:53 UTC. So with that, yes, prop load set to begin now in 30 seconds time. Then coming up at around T-minus 30 minutes is when cryogenic helium load on board the Falcon 9's first stage gets underway. Same will be true on the second stage. Helium will be loaded onto the pressure vessels, and it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. At about T-minus 23 minutes, second stage RP-1 loading should wrap up. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds will be the start of the Strongback chill-down. This is when SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. We'll see this visually as the so-called big vent beginning at around T-minus 16 or T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, lasting until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. After that, the LOX will start to flow at around the 16-minute mark. As you can see, we're at T-minus 34 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. Coming up on 40 seconds now into the fueling process getting underway. Moving along with the timeline for the countdown at T-minus 7 minutes will be the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 booster. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the Strongback. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the Strongback, will recline away from the Falcon 9 rocket just a few degrees, and it will stay in that position until liftoff. And at that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same will be true on the second stage about a minute after that. At this point in the count, the Falcon 9 rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Then in the final 60 seconds, the Falcon 9 rocket will enter into an automated startup sequence, during which control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and at the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will then confirm their go for launch status at T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command will be granted at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, with the go-ahead from SpaceX for tanking, which is now underway, liftoff set for 2:53 a.m. Eastern, 06:53 UTC for those around the world. T-minus 32 minutes, 17 seconds from now. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank Willow Zmum, formerly Zeus Zmum, there on YouTube, for being a channel member with us now for 22 months at the mission specialist level. Says, wow, didn't realize I was approaching the 2-year mark. Best decision I ever made. Love Spaceflight now. Thank you for the kind words. And we are thankful to be seeing the frost line start to build up. Of course, SpaceX did note that they were preparing to step into the start of prop load, but always good to see those visual markers that fueling is in fact underway. Just under 30 minutes now remaining before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. For those of you just joining, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the GPS 3-8 mission. The flight of the final GPS 3 satellite heading up into medium Earth orbit. Where we are in the count, if you are just joining us, SpaceX has been fueling the Falcon 9 rocket for about 6 minutes at this juncture and is just starting to load cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels for the first stage. And we'll do the same on the second stage beginning in about 2.5 minutes or so. Talking about where we are with the Falcon family of rockets. Prior to this mission, SpaceX has sent up 47 Falcon 9 rockets so far in 2026. This will, of course, be number 48. Overall, for the SpaceX fleet, this is the 630th Falcon 9 rocket to take off. On board this particular vehicle, though, an important payload for the U.S. government and for users around the world, primarily in the U.S., of course, but also around the globe. The latest GPS satellites. You're taking a look at a photo shared by SpaceX of this particular satellite as it was being encapsulated within the payload fairings that you see out of the pad right now. For those who missed my remarks on this earlier, one half of the payload fairings is flying for the first time. The other was used on the GPS 3-9 mission earlier this year. Now, for those who've been watching and listening along throughout the course of the coverage, you may be asking, why is... Actually, we'll come back to that photo in a second. Why is there the difference between GPS 3-8 and its space vehicle number 10? I know it's a little confusing. The designation of the number that comes after the GPS 3, that is indicative of the overall mission itself, but is not inherently a representation of the spacecraft serial number that is launching. So the reason that they got off on the numbering system and things changed a little bit is because the last few of the GPS satellites that were dispersed between ULA and SpaceX, the Space Force has decided to pull GPS satellites from launching on Vulcan rockets and move them to Falcon 9 rockets in exchange for future missions as part of the National Security Space Launch, or NSSL, launch contract. So for this mission, the GPS 3 space vehicle number 10 satellite was, again, supposed to launch on a ULA Vulcan rocket, but because the Vulcan fleet is now grounded, once again, unfortunately, because of a solid rocket booster issue that cropped up during the USSF 87 mission earlier this year, and the U.S. Space Force wants to get this capability on orbit to support the Department of Defense. They opted to move this onto a Falcon 9 rocket, one of their fastest turnarounds between launch contract and the launch itself. Meanwhile, in exchange for losing the launch of this GPS satellite right now, ULA will instead launch the USSF 70 mission. That'll happen in the 2028 time frame. SF-70 was originally planned to launch on a Falcon Heavy rocket, so there's a good likelihood that the Vulcan configuration that would fly that mission would be with 6 solid rocket boosters attached, or likely at least 4. We'll have to wait and see exactly how that plays out. For now, the investigation into the SRB anomaly remains ongoing, with ULA working to get back to flight with its Vulcan rockets so that it can resume launching missions for the U.S. Space Force, as well as commercial customers like Amazon and its low Earth orbit constellation. Not a hard and fast timeline for a return to flight mission, but we'll of course keep an eye on that and provide you updates as that progresses. In the meantime, there may be further NSSL payloads that are exchanged from ULA to SpaceX. That is not a foregone conclusion, but Space Force leadership has said that that is certainly a possibility and something that they are looking at. But again, nothing has been decided beyond this latest swap for the GPS satellites. Time now T-minus 23 minutes and counting. Coming up here in the next few minutes, we'll see the big vent from the Strongback as SpaceX chills the feed lines prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. Strongback chill down now underway. We should be seeing the big vent beginning in about 20 seconds. And there you see the start of the big vent. Again, this vent will last about 4 minutes in duration, setting the stage for upper stage liquid oxygen load to begin at around the 16-minute mark. just under 19 minutes remaining in the count now today. All of the GPS satellites in the constellation have been given the nicknames of pioneers. This particular satellite has been nicknamed by Lockheed Martin the Hedy Lamarr, after the actress slash inventor whose frequency hopping research helped to pioneer and lay the groundwork for technologies we all rely on today, like GPS, as well as Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Just about 1 minute remaining in the big vent here. With the big vent wrapped up, we will now see SpaceX turn to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage, beginning in about 5 seconds or so. Time now T minus 12 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. As we are waiting to see the Falcon 9 rocket take off from Space Launch Complex 40 with the GPS 3 mission, 3-8 mission. Let's go ahead and talk about where it's going to be flying once it does leave the pad. Checking in on trajectory here. Again, lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The rocket's set to fly on a northeasterly trajectory once it does leave the pad. Falcon 9 booster B-1095 set to land on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. This will be its 7th flight to date, following the launch of 6 batches of Starlink satellites. SpaceX will also recover the payload fairings being used on today's flight, one half flying for the first time, the other flying for a second. And we are also now getting pad-level views of the Falcon 9 rocket, courtesy of SpaceX. Just a quick note about the two clocks that you see here, the one in the big box and the one in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Our clock is the one in the upper right, that is in real time. What is coming in from SpaceX, while we've done as much as we can to reduce the latency, there still remains some. So that's why it's a little bit behind the real-time clock. We will use real-time callouts for the mission until we are solely relying on the SpaceX onboard camera views. Here's another look at the GPS-3 space vehicle number 10 satellite called the Hedy Lamarr. The satellite that is launching today, SV-10, not only is the final launch of a GPS-3 satellite before they shift to the GPS-3F model that is currently being worked on by Lockheed Martin. This is another satellite that includes better encrypted systems of getting the position, navigating, and timing data to those in the Department of Defense called M-Code. Of the GPS-3 satellites that have launched so far, all but one have been delivered to orbit by SpaceX. Again, there was supposed to be more of a relatively even split between them and ULA, but due to development delays and subsequent groundings due to on-orbit anomalies with the Vulcan rocket, solid rocket boosters, the spacecraft for the last few missions were moved over to Falcon 9 rockets. SpaceX commentator noting that weather still good for launch today, while we saw notes of wind. Let's go ahead and steer away from there. Not that we don't want to hear from General Saltzman, but the pre-produced video does include music that we don't know if it includes copyright attached to it. So better safe than get a copyright strike. 9 minutes remaining on the clock right now. fewer than 8 minutes remaining on the clock right now. In about 45 seconds is when SpaceX will start the engine chill sequence for the Falcon 9 first stage booster, flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, protecting them from thermal shock and damage at startup. Want to correct a statement that I made earlier in the broadcast about the payload fairings. Previously said that one is flying for the first time, the other flying for the second time. That is, in fact, incorrect. One of the fairing halves is flying for a third time, the other for a second time. One of those fairing halves did support the GPS 3-9 mission back in January, though. Also, one bit of notable news that the SpaceX commentator remarked on here just a moment ago is that the drone ship that is being used today, called Just Read the Instructions, will be supporting its final Falcon booster landing today. SpaceX commentator noting that moving forward, it will be used for Starship recovery or Starship operations. So this will be the 158th and final Falcon booster landing for that particular drone ship. Just read the instructions. The first booster landing attempt for that drone ship, just read the instructions, was back in January of 2015. It had its first successful booster recovery on January 14th of 2017 during the Iridium Next mission. You can see the clamp arms beneath the payload fairings have opened up, and the Strongback now reclining away from the Falcon 9 rocket just a little bit here, a few degrees, and it will stay in that slightly reclined position until liftoff.
Looking ahead into the count.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Good call for stage 1 LOX load being complete. We should hear a similar call regarding the second stage at around the T-2 minute mark. As we await that call out, want to thank Jim Edgar for a very generous $50 super chat. Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate the support at that level. Jim says, Jim Edgar, Lisa Bean watching from Snoqualmie, Washington, with the cats Kip, Lola, and Nico. Second stage liquid oxygen load wrapping up. You can see the ground gas closeouts there at the pad. Coming up to the final minute of the count here when the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket will enter into its automated startup sequence.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that, we are just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm that they are in fact go for launch.
Director.
Mission directors go for launch.
And there you heard the mission directors go for launch. Let's sit back and watch as Falcon 9 takes SV-10 to space.
Now 30 seconds out from that liftoff. The voice of that mission director was Colonel Ryan Heisort from the U.S. Space Force. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, delivering the final GPS-3 satellite into medium Earth orbit. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Max Q.
And there's that call out for Max Q.
The point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming up to a few events in rapid succession after MVAC chill. See first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's coming up here at T plus 2 minutes and 29 seconds. That'll be followed by a stage separation and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage. The payload fairings should jettison about 3.5 minutes into flight. see MECO. Stage separation.
Main engine cutoff. Stage separation confirmed. MVAC startup.
Good calls, good visuals. You can see the hypersonic grid fins now deploying on the rocket's booster. Less than 30 seconds to fairing separation.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there is that confirmation for fairing separation. If you're just...
And a good view of the GPS-3 Space Vehicle number 10 satellites, the Hedy Lamarr for a second there. Now looking back at the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage. A little more than 4 minutes into the flight. Coming up, the next burn, or the next event coming up here, which is the next burn. It is using 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines on the rocket's booster. The entry burn, beginning at about T plus 6 minutes and 12 seconds, lasting less than half a minute or so. That will help to slow the booster 1095 down quite noticeably. Again, that burn beginning at around T plus 6 minutes and 12 seconds. A little bit more than a minute's time.
Yes, safe.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
There you heard.
Entry burn now complete. The landing burn coming up next. That will use the single center engine on the Falcon 9 first stage. Landing burn set to begin at about T plus 8 minutes and 10 seconds. A few seconds before that, though, we'll see the cutoff of the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage to begin the start of its coast phase, which will last the better part of an hour. upper stage now in terminal guidance, meaning that it's ending or nearing the end of its current burn. The booster now transonic, traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn.
And that call out means
orbit insertion.
the final burn for this booster.
Impact shutdown.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And another successful landing of our Falcon 9 rocket. Again, this was the 7th launch and landing for this first stage, the final Falcon booster to land on Just Read the Instructions. And we also had confirmed good orbit. And back in space, the second stage is continuing its mission to deliver SV-10 to orbit. The next major milestone will be the second startup of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, also referred to as SES-2. That's coming up at about the T plus 1 hour and 3 minute mark. So we'll be taking a break.
And as you're hearing SpaceX do a little bit of a handover as they enter into a coast phase with the upper stage of their rocket, a successful final booster recovery for the drone ship. Just read the instructions before it transitions to service for the Starship program. We too here at Spaceflight Now are going to be doing our own handoff here, as I'm going to hand over the commentary reins to our editor here at Spaceflight Now, Stephen Young. As mentioned, heading up to the Goddard Space Flight Center today, so folks, I've got a plane to catch. It's been a lovely morning to be with you covering the final flight of a GPS-3 satellite, and I leave you in the very capable hands of my colleague and our editor, Stephen Young, who will take you through the rest of the broadcast through to the deployment of the GPS-3 space vehicle number 10, named Hedy Lamarr. So with that, I hope you all have a good rest of your day. We hope you subscribe to the channel here and follow along with our coverage coming out of this trip to Goddard. And thank you for your continued support. The next voice you'll hear will be Stephen Young, so thank you all. Hope you continue to watch through the deployment of the GPS-3 space vehicle number 10. And I personally will catch you next time, but continue to enjoy the broadcast as it remains in motion.
Thank you, Will. We're in a coast phase for about an hour, so stay tuned because we'll get our launch replays ready and have those for you very soon. We're 11 minutes and 24 seconds into the flight of the Falcon 9 with the GPS 3-8 satellite. On the screen now, you're looking at the Merlin vacuum engine of the Falcon 9 second stage as the upper stage with the attached GPS satellite moves into orbital sunlight. It's now traveling towards Europe. Currently at an altitude of 179 kilometers. Getting some spectacular views as the upper stage of the Falcon 9 soars over the Atlantic Ocean, heading towards the British Isles. We'll have those replays ready for you shortly. T plus 25 minutes, the Falcon 9 second stage with the GPS satellite attached is soaring over Eastern Europe and heading towards the Black Sea. We have those replays lined up now for you to relive this morning's launch from all the different angles. We'll start with the view from the press site fixed camera. Up next, the wide camera located at the press site. Next, the view from the turn basin with the reflection on the water. Moving to Pete Carson's tracker to the south. Fortunately, some cloud in the area, so that curtailed some of Pete's shots. Now the view from Pete's wide tracker. Jumping ahead to the other side of the cloud. See in the box on the right, the Falcon 9 starting to move across the Middle East. Now going to Chuck and Jen Briggs' view from Loop Road on the Space Force station. Next, also Cape Side, was our Adam Bernstein. And finally, John Pisani's view from the 39A press site. So 38 minutes and 59 seconds into this flight of the Falcon 9. That will conclude our launch replays. We're in the coast phase between the burns of the second stage. Ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine that you see in this view from an onboard camera is coming up in about 31 minutes. Correction, sorry, coming up in about 24 minutes. This will be a 47-second burn of that Merlin vacuum engine when it reignites. About 23 minutes left in this coast. Falcon 9 heading out over the Arabian Sea and into the Indian Ocean. Now at an altitude of 396 kilometers. Coming up on the halfway mark in the Falcon 9's mission, the deployment of the GPS 3-8 Space Vehicle 10 satellite is coming up in about 45 minutes from now. The altitude of the upper stage and the attached GPS satellite continues to climb as it works its way towards its apogee. Lost onboard camera views from the Falcon 9 as it heads out over the Indian Ocean. We're now less than 50 minutes away from the ignition of the second stage Merlin vacuum engine. There will be a 47-second burn. Deployment of the GPS satellite will come about 25 minutes after the completion of that burn. Back at the launch site, the Strongback has already raised to the vertical position, part of the process of turning the pad around for the next launch. The next mission to fly from Launch Complex 40 will be a Starlink delivery mission scheduled for May 1st. But that won't be the next rocket to visit the pad. SpaceX is getting ready for its first Falcon Heavy launch in some time. If we take a look at Launch Complex 39A, you can see the Strongback and the launch mount are still at the pad, but they will soon move to the hangar where the Falcon Heavy vehicle will be attached. The 3-core version of the Falcon vehicle is scheduled to fly on April 27th, carrying the Viasat 3 Flight 3 mission. And one of the side boosters will actually return to Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So there's a little bit longer of a gap between launches from that pad to accommodate the landing of one of those side boosters. That landing pad is known as Landing Zone 40. The other side booster will touch down at Landing Zone 2, further south on Cape Canaveral property. The core stage of the Falcon Heavy will be expended. SpaceX did attempt to recover that core stage during the first flights of the Falcon Heavy, but proved to be a challenge because of the flight profile of the heavy lift rocket. So all core stages have been expended since then. We're about 5 minutes away from that second firing of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. The vehicle is now passing south of Australia. Getting views once more from the second stage cameras. Looking towards the Merlin vacuum engine nozzle and the sun. And there's a view of the GPS satellite. We're now 1 hour into flight. About 3 minutes remaining before the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Starting to see the chill down of that engine getting underway. Less than 3 minutes until the burn. Quite interesting lighting effects here as the chill down of the engine is underway. Let's listen in to SpaceX as the burn approaches.
MVAC ignition.
This is a 47-second
There we
burn.
have it, confirmation of SES-2. This burn is set to last about 1 minute and will get the payload into the proper orbit for payload deployment. And after the second shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine, we're going to take another break before payload deploy.
MVAC shutdown.
And there's SECO-2 indicating shutdown of the MVAC engine and the final burn before spacecraft separation. Payload deploy is coming up at about the T plus 1 hour and 29-minute mark, so stick around and we'll see you back here in about 23 minutes.
And confirmation from SpaceX of a good burn. The Falcon 9 second stage is currently in a roughly 425 kilometer circular orbit. We're about 18 minutes away from the deployment of the GPS satellite. now less than 9 minutes to the deployment of the GPS 3-8 satellite. Getting views once more of the Falcon 9 second stage Merlin vacuum engine nozzle. The Falcon 9 is now about 3.5 minutes away from releasing the GPS satellite. It will be deployed into an orbit that ranges from about 250 miles or 400 kilometers to 12,500 miles or 20,000 kilometers. That's a transfer orbit. The satellite will use its own propulsion to circularize that orbit at about 12,500 miles in altitude. That process of raising the orbit is expected to take about 10 days. Just about a minute to go before the deployment. Let's listen in to SpaceX.
Our live coverage of the GPS 3.8 mission. Before the break, we saw the second burn of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, which lasted about 1 minute. Following that, we received confirmation that the vehicle was placed into a good orbit. We're now waiting for a payload deployment coming up at about the T plus 1 hour, 29 minutes and 19 second mark. Today's payload is GPS-3 Space Vehicle 10, or SV-10, the most innovative spacecraft in National Security Space Launch Program history. Once on orbit, SV-10 will complete the GPS-3 constellation, marking 32 GPS satellites in the active constellation, with extra redundancy and resiliency, including additional vehicles on orbit. GPS delivers precise timing signals for everyday activities from mobile devices, banking transactions, air traffic control, and earthquake detection to navigation across air, land, and sea.
GPS 3.8, payload deploy confirmed.
And there you heard and saw a successful deployment of the GPS 3.8 payload. And with successful deployment of SV-10, we'll be bringing our live mission coverage to a close. We'd like to thank the United States Space Force for entrusting us with today's mission, as well as the Range and FAA for their support. If you're interested in more launch coverage, head on over to spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information.
So with that, a successful conclusion to the GPS 3-8 Space Vehicle 10 mission. Let's take a look at the stats as they now stand. This was the 7th flight of Falcon 9 Booster 1095, the 630th flight of a Falcon 9 rocket to date, the 48th Falcon 9 launch of this year, and the 562nd time that a Falcon 9 booster has been reflown. It's also the 169th SpaceX orbital launch in the last 365 days, the 323rd SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 378th overall orbital launch from that facility. Taking a look at the bar chart, you can see the Falcon 9 is well on the way to potentially beating previous records. So far, 48 launches this year. If we take a look at the recovery stats, this was the 158th landing on Just Read the Instructions. And SpaceX tonight revealed that it was also the last Falcon 9 to land on that drone ship. It will now move over to working on the Starship program, most likely transporting parts of the vehicle from the Starbase construction site to the Kennedy Space Center. Although facilities are being built at the Florida spaceport, they will not be ready in time to perhaps support the first flight of a Starship vehicle from the facility at 39A at the Kennedy Space Center. Overall, this was the 497th SpaceX drone ship landing, the 601st SpaceX booster landing, and the 603rd overall booster landing. That statistic needs to be updated because of the landing of the New Glenn vehicle. Looking at the mission stats, this was the 30th orbital launch from Florida, the 54th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 59th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, the 92nd orbital launch attempt globally, and there have now been 6 orbital launch failures. Taking a look at the pie chart, the U.S. getting the lion's share of launches so far this year. So I'll leave you with the view at Launch Complex 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. This will be the next SpaceX launch from Florida. There is a Vandenberg launch planned for April 22nd and 26th, but the next launch from the East Coast will be from the pad you see on your screen here, Launch Complex 39A, a Falcon Heavy scheduled for launch on April 27th, carrying the Viasat 3 Flight 3 mission. So I want to thank our team of photographers, John Pisani and Adam Bernstein, and of course, Will Robinson Smith, who started off the commentary for tonight. Also, a big thank you to our moderators in the chat, to M. Teresa, and to Cumulus Granatus, who was helping to answer questions this evening. So with that, I wish you a very good night, and we'll see you for the next launch coming up later this week.